Welcome, everyone. This is Austin. This is Flashpoint. Your turnaround story starts right here. I am very excited about today's interview, and I know this is going to serve you at a very high level when you hear this story. I consider this a legacy interview, if you will, because this is somebody who's been at this for a very, very long time. But before we get into the interview, I want to share with you what we highlight is the hourglass during the Flashpoint segment. And the reason why we do this is because you just clicked on this and we want you to get value out of this interview, of the exchange that's going to happen today. And this is a reminder that the only place we can be is right here. We can't be too much into the future worrying about the next thing, and we can't go backwards. We can only be right here. So as we get into this interview, I want to invite you to take a breath and sit with us during this interview. So let me get into this special individual that you're going to meet today. All right. I'm going to be bringing on Dr. Bruce Main here in a minute, the founder of UrbanPromise. But before I do, I want to lay some context here for those of you that don't know Dr. Main. He's got an incredible background. He founded UrbanPromise in the basement, a dark basement in East Camden 33 years ago, with a vision to help local youth, to get them off the dangerous streets, to provide a safe, fun place for education. He's been the executive director since the inception. He received his doctorate degree from Princeton Theological Seminary. He's an adjunct professor at Eastern University. And he was actually highlighted on Diane Sawyer's 2020 special, Waiting on the World to Change. He speaks nationally and internationally to mission conferences and colleges around the world. He's the author of 3 books. And get this, most recently, you're going to love this title, Why Jesus Crossed the Road, Learning to Follow the Unconventional Travel Itinerary of a First Century Carpenter and his ragtag group of friends as they hop fences, cross borders, and generally go where most people don't. How's that for a title? Not to mention, he's just an all-around humble, great guy. Let's get into this story and hear more about this incredible man. Dr. Bruce Main, welcome to Flashpoint.
Austin, it's great to be with you. Thanks so much for the invitation. Really good.
Yes, I've been looking forward to this, and just not only to hear the story, but to have some great conversation with you. I want to jump right into it, if you will, because I know people want to hear your story. I'd like to go back in time, if you will. Let's go back in. Maybe we can go back through the lens of time into your story, because what I found was amazing that you had this vision, and maybe you could talk about that. At 25, you're in East Camden, and you're following this mission. I would love for you to talk about your story back then and how all this came together.
Sure. I don't know how far you want to go back, but I started, actually, I was born in Vancouver, British Columbia, and after high school wanted to be a stockbroker. And so I went into that right out of high school. I was a day trader at the Vancouver Stock Exchange, and made a little money, then lost a bunch of money, and decided, hey, I better go to college. And so I ended up going to a college in Southern California, and I bumped into a gentleman there that taught at Eastern University, University of Pennsylvania, a guy named Dr. Tony Campolo. And Tony recruited me to come run a summer camp in Camden, New Jersey. And that was the beginning of this story. I was a junior in college, and I came back and ran a program and just saw the need for vibrant, creative, structured programs for young people in the city.
It's interesting. How did you end up in Camden? Just from the invitation of Dr. Tony Campolo?
Yeah, well, Tony had a nephew who was pastoring a little Baptist church, and they wanted to do a summer camp program. They were looking for a director, and I'd never been to the East Coast. I remember landing in Philadelphia, got a ride over to Camden, got dropped off in East Camden. and started this program. And I just remember, Austin, we didn't really know what we were doing. We were a bunch of college kids, and but we sort of opened the doors of a church, and we had 150 kids show up. And just realized that one of the issues confronting young people in the city is they've got 2.5 months off during the school year, and they're not going to the Jersey Shore, they're not going to summer camp, and so
Right.
opportunity is limited, and that's the kind of need that we tried to speak into and address.
Now, 150, that's a lot, right, to show up at the first one that you did?
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I was going to say, did you see or feel the need or the call right away? Or was it like, let's just serve right now and see what happens? Or did you kind of feel this bigger vision?
No, I never, people ask me that a lot, like, did you have this big vision? And it was really more about like being in the moment. Like, okay, I forget how old I was, like you're in your mid-20s, early 20s. And it's like all these kids are showing up. Let's create a great program. And, and when you're running a camp in the city, I mean, you're just, you're scheduling trips with buses, and you're, lunch and breakfast, and trying to put a good skit on, and making sure there's arts and crafts supplies. And so, it was more just, okay, let's create the best program possible. But what began to happen is from that, you began to see, well, gee, we're running this in East Camden. We could really use this in North Camden, and we could really use this in South Camden. And it just began to grow somewhat organically.
Yes. And I want to commend you, because this is global now. And maybe we'll get into that before the end of the interview, but this is a global operation. Thanks to your continuing with this. I love the way you said you were, it's like you were serving in the moment.
Yeah.
You were sowing seed, doing this in the moment. And then I guess as you move forward, it started to evolve.
Yeah, well, people started to notice, and that's what happened in Camden. It's, you're running this program in one part of the city, and word, spreads around. And so we started getting some calls from pastors, in other parts of the city that, were struggling to reach the community. And they said, hey, if we open our doors, could you guys, could you start a program here? And so before long, we had 3 or 4 programs going around the city, and then people from other cities began to notice. And so I got a call from a guy from Wilmington, and a call from a guy in Toronto, and Trenton, and so it's sort of that idea that success begets success. And it wasn't so much this idea, well, let's become this worldwide organization. It's like, let's do something really quality. And I think when you do that, people notice, and word spreads, and they say, we need this in our community as well.
Yeah. And I want to grab a couple things before we move on. And I got some comments coming in. So excited to hear your story. Be in the moment. Love it. Love it. And like the hourglass, be in the moment. Right. I want to get back to this. Like, you had this. And by the way, I didn't know you. I must have forgot you were from Canada. I have a lot of friends from Canada, and I love that you're from Canada. You ended up here. It's interesting the way things turn. But you have this drive to make a lot of money, right? You're in the stock exchange, and then you end up in Southern California. I'm wondering, like, was there some kind of epiphany for you? Because typically, and not to stereotype, but if you're money motivated, here you are, want to make a lot of money, and now you're in Camden here doing this like work of the heart, where it can't be. I mean, it's really not, money's not the driving force, although you need a lot of it to continue and sustain, right?
Sure.
So if you talk about that, I would love to hear that.
Yeah, well, when I was working at the stock exchange, I was young, and this is in the days before trading was all automated. So, you'd actually literally have to memorize all the symbols on the board. You'd get in at 5 a.m., you'd take the orders, you'd go out. And, this is before smoking regulations. So everybody on the floor is smoking. There's like this, and it's just this, and I realized, like, after a little bit, I looked around, and I don't think there was anybody over 30 on the floor. It's just a young person's sport. and then, losing some money, realizing the volatility of it. But I think, Austin, when I went to college, that's when I really began to sort of reflect on my life and, what I wanted my life to be about. And I think it was, through sort of some of those initial opportunities to serve that I was able to see, hey, there's a bigger world out here. And, you got kids like in Camden, you got a city of 80,000 people, 40,000 kids. At that time, you had a 50% dropout rate in your public schools. Less than 10% of the kids were going to college. So it was like, man, I think my faith at that point was maturing too. And it was like, I need to sort of, put my faith into action. And that's what got me kind of to take that first step. And then, when I took that first step, it was like, I can't really turn back at this point.
Yeah, it's a cowbell moment. The cowbell to highlight these great moments. Would you say that Tony was a mentor for you?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know whether you know Tony, but he's extremely inspiring, and again, he came and spoke at my college, and we started to dialogue, and one of Tony's great gifts was, I think, mobilizing young people to, really put their faith into action and not just talk about it, but actually, address some of these, big issues that are confronting our world. And, to a 22-year-old, that was really appealing. And, it was a message that I'd never really heard before. And so, again, the opportunity to serve in Camden, and, Camden in the, mid 80s was probably at its lowest point, and, tough city, tough place for kids to grow up. And, again, just realized that, like churches were fleeing the city. The tax base had eroded,
right.
So there wasn't a lot of opportunity for young people. So, really out of a commitment sort of to justice and to, affirming the dignity of these young people, like we needed to be there.
Yeah. And by the way, I just want to highlight, did you co-author a book with Tony?
I did. Yeah. Back, I think it was called Revolution and Renewal, How Churches Are Saving the City. And Tony's premise was, that the church is in a lot of these urban communities, like, the church is one of the few institutions that's kind of survived, jobs left, Rotary clubs, civic groups. And yet you've got these churches that are sort of in these communities, and a lot of them, had closed their doors, and we tried to reopen them and, help them become a vital part of the community again.
That is a really difficult time that you're talking about, Bruce. I'm wondering, do you remember some early adversity that you had to face head on and make some tough decisions?
Yeah, well,
probably a lot of them, right? Which way you want to start?
Yeah, well, like everybody talks about making a difference, and when you're trying to start something, people are kind of like watching and saying, okay, is this guy for real, or is this group for real? And
yes,
we start. I don't know what you read, but we start our first year. Our budget was $12,000. I mean that included gas money and my salary, and so it was like. It was hard at the beginning to get people to believe, that something could really evolve. And so, that was certainly a challenge in the early days, is just finding people that would work for nothing. And
work for mission.
Work for mission, and really tap into sort of that deeper sense of purpose and faith in people's lives. And so, so the early years were some of the most challenging, but then, once you got something going and people could come and visit and they could talk to the kids whose lives were being changed, it was like, oh, this is real and this needs to be supported. And these guys are running, they're running a lean budget, and, my dollar is going to go a long way. And so sort of once we won that trust, things began to turn a little bit.
Yes. And I was reading that you've had over 1,600 interns to this point.
Yeah. So yeah, especially in the early days, one of the things we did is we recruited college students, almost like a Peace Corps kind of experience. And so,
Yeah.
during the summer, I would be hosting, 80, 90 college students from all over the world. We'd be housing them in different locations around the city. But Austin, the operative word is that they would work for free. And,
yeah.
and they had a lot, idealism is high and these were young people that, again, really wanted to make a difference and wanted to love kids. And those were some exciting years.
Yeah, let's do this. I want to take a break. I want to share a video about kind of what's happening with Urban Promise today, and then we're going to share maybe what the vision you may have today. And also, I want to grab maybe something, get people to get maybe a fun hobby that you and your family have, or you. Maybe we get some new information from you today to share. How's that?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, let me share this video with you right now.
So this is Urban Promise. We started 33 years ago. We are focused on children and teens in the city here. And we do after-school programs, summer camps. We're the largest private employer of teens in the city. A couple of alternative schools. We build boats. We do everything with kids. We're in East Camden, right on the corner of 36th and Federal Street. And this is sort of our campus, our main hub in the city of Camden. 33 years ago when we started, there really wasn't a lot for young people to do in the city, and especially during the summer months, after school hours. So we really wanted to focus on those out of school hours, get kids off the streets and into programs that would challenge them academically, socially, spiritually, and really have a focus of leadership. And we have this sort of K to college vision for our young people. So you'll meet kids around here at Urban Promise and they'll have been here for 15, 16 years and they've kind of grown up here.
Bruce, I really like that little clip there. And the one thing that struck me is when you said we build boats, I thought that just speaks to the diversity of what you do and your willingness to bring in new things.
Well, one of the things that I love, again, it's tapping into, just the entrepreneurial spirit of people. And that's, to me, that's always exciting as sort of as a leader, creating space for people to bring their gifts and to really use them. And I had a guy named Jim Cummings, great guy. He had a small carpet cleaning business in South Jersey, and approached me one day after a church service and said, "Hey, you think kids in your program would be interested in going canoeing once a month?" And so I said, "Sure." So he started this little outdoor club. He'd meet with a small group of kids Friday afternoon, and he did this for a couple of years. And then one day we're sitting down at Dunkin' Donuts on Route 130. And he said, this program could really go to another level. And I said, Jim, it sure could. And he said, yeah, I don't know what to do. And I said, Jim, I think you got to sell your business and jump in with both feet. And he kind of looked at me with this shocked look. And he goes home that night, tells his wife, Rayanne, he says, Rayanne, you wouldn't believe what Bruce said today. He said he thinks I should sell the business and, join Urban Promise full time. And she looked at him and she said, yeah, Jim, I think you should do that. And that was the beginning. And
I got chills, Bruce. I got chills.
Yeah. And, Austin, what was so neat is, Jim started by taking kids, outdoors canoeing. And then, one day he comes into my office and says, hey, I'd like to build boats with kids. And I said, Jim, do you know how to build boats? And he said, well, no. I said, well, you should probably go recruit some people that have had some experience. So he goes out, he finds a lawyer, a respiratory therapist, and an accountant. And they in this little church, abandoned church in South Camden, they build these 3 rowboats. Wow. And that was the beginning of our boat building program. And now we've got, 25, 30 volunteers. It's a program that's completely done by volunteers. And they build these beautiful wooden kayaks and canoes. And then the kids, they wanted to take them on the water. And so they started paddling, the tidal pools of the Cooper. And they started realizing that some of the water was contaminated. So they started testing it. And sort of this whole ecological kind of thing developed out of it. So it's how things work at Urban Promise.
Well, it's interesting. I'm thinking about Noah, like go build a boat. I don't know how to build a boat. But you know what else I wanted to highlight is what's interesting is this really speaks to the book you one of the books you wrote, which was Spotting the Sacred, noticing God in the most unlikely places.
Yeah.
And I think this story that you shared really speaks to that book that you wrote as well.
Yeah, I guess in that book, I was challenged by my Jesuit friends in North Camden. I was raised Baptist, and so I've been learning a lot. But it's sort of this idea that you find expressions of God in the brokenness, and it's really about the lens you look at life through and experiences through, and that's been a very helpful kind of paradigm shift for me. I think a lot of people look at communities like Camden or what I would call under-resourced communities, and they only see the negative. And when you can begin to shift that that worldview, and you begin to see the possibility and the hope
Yes.
and the opportunity, man, that was a big shift for me.
Yes, and I think had the opportunity to be at one of the functions. And by the way, I want to give a shout out to Chip Chapman for setting up this interview.
Yeah,
so, Chip, I know you're listening. We appreciate this, but I wanted to highlight that when I had the opportunity to visit your location, is that the culture you create, like everything you're talking about, it carries through to the people, and that's why my feeling was people were so passionate about the mission, because of what you created. And I love that because I believe in that so much. And that's what I work really hard to do, is to create that space, to create that environment where people feel confident to show up with their gifts and give their gifts. And I think I witnessed that when I had the opportunity to be at your facility.
Yeah. I remember, I think probably one of the greatest compliments I ever got was from a friend of mine. She teaches up at Princeton Seminary. And she came down one day for a tour, and we toured around, and we're in my office afterwards. And she said, Bruce, there is a culture of permission here. And I thought, that's a great line, and, this idea that people feel like they have permission to take chances, to risk, to explore, to create, to innovate. And, and that's really what's happened over the years, is like, there's no manual for this, right, Austin?
Yeah.
Like, you experiment, you fail, you learn from that, and you try something new. And, we tried boats and it worked.
Right. I mean, it's the same thing with this show. I mean, people see the show, they think it's so many things that can go wrong, and,
right.
And it takes a lot of work, and it's just being able to create that space for people to be able to show up and be okay with making a mistake. And to me, that's leadership, and that's what you bring, and is this amazing humility, yet leadership that gives people the permission and the encouragement to do it. So I applaud you for that.
Yeah, and in the end of the day, like programs, at least in my experience, don't really change people. People change people. And that's, programs are a vehicle in which we reach young people. But at the end of the day, it's really these relationships that, when I talk to kids that have been out of UrbanPromise for 15, 20 years, and I say, what do you remember? What was the highlight for you? It's seldom the trips or the curriculum. It's often, people, specific people that they remember.
It's so true. It is. It's the people interacting with people that make the difference. And you've created an incredible environment for that to happen. Let's talk. We got about maybe 6 minutes left. I want to talk about this is global now. This is exciting. You're in Toronto, Canada. You're in different parts of the world. Maybe we could speak to that, and then just talk about what do you see moving forward for UrbanPromise and Bruce Main.
Yeah, so great question. We're in 29 locations now around the world, and again, our philosophy has been like, we don't have a strategic plan to say, hey, we want to be in Detroit or we want to be in Lansing, Michigan. we really, our model has been people come to us and say, we need this in our community. And usually, sort of the deal breaker for me is there that leader, that entrepreneur, that person that sort of embodies the values that that wants to take that leap of faith. Yeah. And if we find that, then then it's like, well, how do you not get behind that? And so, for example, 13 years ago, I'm sitting in my office in East Camden, and knock on the door. I look up, there's this young man. I find out he's from Malawi, Africa. At that point, Austin, I couldn't have found Malawi. I probably would have thought it was one of the Hawaiian Islands. And he says, I'm here to do my internship. And I said, well, usually people apply, and he talked to somebody in South Africa. They said, come see Bruce in New Jersey. He got through the border. And anyway, long story short, 6 months into his internship, he comes back into my office and says, we need this in Malawi. And I said, well, put together a little proposal. He comes back. We raise a little money. He goes back to Malawi. He starts an NGO in Malawi called Youth Care. And, a year later, I go over there to check out what he's doing. He's got a little orphanage for kids. He's running after school programs. But here's the thing that really was the game changer. I went to the college that he graduated from, and I'm talking to one of the faculty members afterwards. And she said, Bruce, sometimes I just want to quit my job, start my own NGO. And I said, why? She said, well, 80% of the population, there's no jobs in Malawi. Most of the kids that graduate from college here won't go, into the field that they're trained to go into. Right. So I said, well, you know what? Why don't you identify 6 or 7 of your graduating seniors, and we'll raise a little money. We'll bring them to the U.S. We'll inspire them, train them, and then, see what happens. And we brought that first cohort of leaders over. And out of those 6, 4 went back and started 3 new NGOs. And, that really became the moment where it's like, this is what we need to do. We need to find leaders, young leaders, emerging leaders from around the world, bring them to Camden, New Jersey, let them see a living, breathing NGO with all its warts. And then we need to inspire these young people and then get some resources in their hands so they can go back and create these kinds of programs. Because, there's kids all over the world that just need opportunity.
Jason says, tell me when and where. This is great. We got a couple minutes. Tell me something about you that's unique, fun. Like, do you do something fun with you and your family? A yearly trip? Do you fish? Do you just play games?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Well, so our kids are like, they're in their upper 20s now. So, they're kind of at that stage where they're, figuring life out, but they're great young people. I've got 2 living in Los Angeles, 1 living in Vancouver. So they're a little bit of a distance from us, but, we love to travel as a family, when we can. And, when the kids were younger, we used to do like some home exchanges, and just go to another country and, hang out and learn about the culture. And I think it was a really a positive experience for our family, even though we didn't have any money, you just sort of figured it out and did it. And, those were great experiences. And I think, it really lit a kind of a fire in our kids to continue to explore and be curious about the world.
Bruce, this has been great. I really enjoyed our time together today. And I wish we had a whole nother 30 minutes to hear more of your stories, because I know you have a lot of them, but maybe we'll have you back again. Any final comment before we say goodbye for the day?
Yeah, this has been great. And again, Margaret Mead, I think, once said, something about, what changes the world. It's a small group of committed people. It's always been that way. And, I just encourage people to get out there, get involved, and make a difference.
Bruce, thank you so much. Very well said. Great note to end on. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for Flashpoint Friday. This is Dr. Bruce Main, the founder of UrbanPromise. Feel free to connect with me if you want to learn more about the organization, or just connect. Have a great Friday, everyone. Bye-bye.